This is Signature Gold. .TV.
Stand by for transmission.
This is Smithy.tv.
I've eaten lots of food, I've had lots to drink, and then I went and took a piss. Then I turned on this podcast that is called CastThis. Welcome to another episode of CastThis.
Welcome to CastThis. I'm Ryan Goldhar.
I'm James Scott, and today
We have a very special guest. I got to bring family in.
Larry Goldhar.
Larry Goldhar. Hello.
Hi guys, how are you?
You get to talk to camera sometimes, or we can talk to you and make it complete. Yeah. Or we can look outside longingly. Looks nice out today.
It's pretty good.
All right. So Larry is a talent agent and has been a talent agent in Toronto for a number of years.
42.
42 years.
Really?
42 years.
Wow.
And generally, CastThis, we talk about, the actor guests come on and we talk about what got them started in their careers as actors, why they went into acting in the first place, things that, why they wanted to do it, their casting experiences, and so on and so forth.
That does not apply here.
Well, it could. I mean, technically, you have done some acting, but not in over 50 years, probably.
Not since high school.
I've got a question. You were a producer at the CBC back in the 60s. You did promotions for them.
In the promotions department, right?
What made you decide to start a talent agency when you were... Because you started it while you were still a producer there. So.
Well, somebody at the CBC came up to me with a magazine article about an uglies modeling agency in London, England, making a fortune in selling ugly people for commercials. And everybody I have ever known at the CBC was always looking for the day that they would be out of the CBC, even though it was a phenomenal training ground.
Yeah.
And I always believed that if you're going to start a business, you either had to be better than everybody else who was in it, or you had to be unique. And I thought, selling ugly people, gosh, that's unique.
And hence the Uglies Talent Agency was created.
Actually, Uglies Unlimited was started, and we soon, like in about 40 minutes, realized that the two of us couldn't run this place. We had to have a third party who wasn't working at the CBC, who could talk to these clients. And so we got a third party in, and we ran the company with the telephone number 787-UGLY. And we tried to sell ugly people, and in several months never sold a single person in a job, not one. And then after a few months had passed, we had a number of members of the Actors Union, ACTRA, who had started questioning us and wanted to sign on. And then we got a letter from ACTRA that said, you can't represent ACTRA members unless you belong to our franchise. We didn't even know what a franchise was. At that time, ACTRA had a franchise for the agents. There were only 4 of them, other than us. And so...
In all of Toronto.
In all of Toronto. So we said, what's a franchise? And they said, it's a code of ethics. And we said, well, we're ethical, we'll sign. And they said, well, not so fast. We want you to change your name because we find saying uglies is offensive. And our performers can be ugly, but they are not necessarily ugly. And we said, well, how come we change our name? We sell ugly people. Anyway, so we went down into the recreation room of one of the fellas, the fellow who brought the article to me in the first place. And we got out a Roget's Thesaurus, which, by the way, I still have on my shelf at work 42 years later. And we looked up ugly and then went for all the capitalized words that we could find after that until we came across the word character. And then we said, hey, wait a minute, that's ugly without being offensive. And so we changed the name to The Characters. And actually, that was the the moment from which our star began to rise.
Nice.
Because we became legitimate. And actor members started to sign on with us. Actually, character actors started to sign on with us. And it took a full year before good-looking people started to sign on with us.
You go ahead.
And then while the agency was running, you still were working at the CBC. At what point did you come on to the...
About 2.5 years in, we started to do enough business that it could afford the salaries of two of us. What happened is the first guy who brought the magazine article, Michael Scott, dropped out after about 1 year.
No relation to James Scott.
And the other fellow, Laurie Rotenberg,
no relation to Ryan Goldhar. Is that true, though?
No relation.
Okay.
Just Jewish.
who lived across the hall from me in the apartment building. And he started to run the business. And so the two of us were there. And one day he said to me, we could afford both of us to go out now. Mm-hmm. So I left the CBC and I came in. And at the beginning was doing promotional work for the company. And while Laurie was running things with the clients.
Mm-hmm. In those days, what sort of and was this all? Were the actors both? Were you representing them for both theater and film and television work at that time?
Yes, there wasn't a lot of film work.
Yeah,
we were doing some television. It was mostly CBC.
Was CTV around in those days?
I can't remember, but they weren't producing anything. They may have been showing things, but they weren't.
The countdown to those sci-fi shows with what's that fella's name? And The Littlest Hobo, I guess.
Yes. So that was the CBC. And we...
What, like the nature of things? Or
No.
seeing things?
Robin... he's been a weather guy as well, Robin Ward. Those sci-fi movies that they used to make. Now, I've heard in those days all the agents represented all the actors in Toronto.
That's right.
And so whoever got the actor the job got the commission, I guess.
Yes, it was who had to be fastest. And most of the work we did was commercials.
Okay.
So it was whoever called the actor first got the job. So, two or three of us might think of the same person. And we would phone, and the person would come home and listen to their recording machine and see who called them first, and usually return those calls before they even listened to the other messages.
Sounds like the Wild West.
That was the agent who was the agent of record. But eventually, we didn't really get all the commissions for that work anyway because they stopped paying us. But then, I think it was. Shortly after I had started working there, so it was in 1972, ACTRA came up with a new version of, they said, we want the agents to be exclusive now. We want you to have an exclusive roster. Well, we were scared to death because we were young. Our agency was only a couple of years old. We were a couple of guys running this place. We didn't know how the heck could we get the best people in town. Mm-hmm. And what happened is that two performers, Nick Nichols, who has since passed away in the past year, and Bonnie Brooks, who were two of the top commercial voice people and on-camera people, got together. I think I can't remember whether it was 17 or 25. I have those two numbers in my head. But they got all their friends who were like very good performers, and they had a meeting and they said, if we all go to the same agency, the producers will be forced to call that agency because all the good performers will be there. So they all agreed that that was a good idea and that they would choose one of the 5 agencies. And they chose us. And
you didn't have to do a pitch to them or anything
nothing.
Like that?
It was, they just saw 2 young guys who were hungry and hardworking at the beginning. I guess we were all those things. and they chose us. And quite frankly, their selection of us made a complete difference in how we did business after that.
Roughly, how many represented actors would there have been in Toronto back in the early 70s?
That's a good question. Probably a few thousand.
Oh, okay.
There were probably 3,000, something
Okay.
like that. We would have filing cabinets before we went exclusive, and you'd open filing cabinet. We had 1,000 people in the drawer. You know,
Physically.
no question. Physically.
It's like a morgue in there.
No, it was like a Japanese hotel. It was-
It was, but it changed in the beginning, and we started representing probably 150 people, 100 people, 150, something like that.
and hence the breakdown of every category of age and sex and
That's actually
ethnicity
how it came. We'd break down our files, and we still do it to this day. Our by 5-year age groupings. So it'd be 20 and under, and then or 19 and under, and then it'd be 20 to 24, 25 to 30. 31 to 30 to 34, 35 to whatever, 39, and you really have to have at least 2 people in each category to make a living in the business. So that's how we filled it out. We started out with there were 9 categories, so we'd have 2 in each is 36, 2 sexes is 72. We'd have 72 clients to start, but then, as Ryan pointed out, we had to go to different ethnicities and whatnot. So we ended up with 100 to 150 people.
When did you start taking other agents on in your agency?
It was a few years because we really weren't doing the business. In the late 70s.
Now, was that symptomatic of the entire city, though, at that time?
Yeah. You said the entire country. And
I can't imagine they were shooting too
to,
much out in Saskatoon at
films
that
started
time.
to come here. In the late 70s, they were actually doing almost softcore porn films here. They were doing films that they had difficulty shooting in other places. And they made really cheesy films at the very beginning.
Yeah, sometimes they show those on television still.
and Porkies.
And Porkies. Well, isn't that the most successful Canadian film of all time?
Well, no, I think now
It
it's
was.
Good Cop, Bon Cop. I think overtook it.
Yeah.
Really, internationally, even?
Yes.
Oh.
Because it has an audience, right? I mean, it's French and English.
C'est ça.
C'est ça. Okay, so then we moved on, and then as a generation passed, and you had to start becoming a lot more selective, I guess, in who you took on and who was around, and your agency spread out. So now you have, I mean, throughout the 80s, and that's just, the eras that I remember growing up. You had, 4 or 5 programming agents in the agency, a commercial department, which held the voice department as well, and that was separate from what you would handle, right? So as an agent, you handled film and TV and theater, and then there was an agent for voice and commercials, right?
Correct. And for the longest time, we had only 4 programming agents, a maximum of 4. Now we have 7. We also have 2 literary agents, and we have 2 commercial agents.
When did you branch out into literary, like non-acting based talent?
In the late 90s. In the late 80s. 89, I think it was. We started a literary department.
Was that decade of the 90s kind of the height of the production and stuff?
It was absolutely the height. In the 90s, that is certainly the most rewarding of all of the years that I've been in the business. Is in that decade we did a lot of work, a lot of quality work, and a lot of quality negotiations. And nowadays, in the 2000s, it's actually more difficult to negotiate, and there are budget restraints all the time on productions. So they don't bring as many people in. Like, for example, most productions say that our U.S. productions and are shot in Canada will bring in a couple of people from California, and then they try to cast most of the rest of the cast locally. Whereas in the old days, they would bring in a few Canadians who were residing elsewhere, in New York, in London, in Los Angeles, in Vancouver, and we used to bring them in and negotiate very good salaries for them to come in. That doesn't happen much anymore.
There's a characters agency out in Vancouver.
1986 was the expo in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I took my family out there. I was ashamed to say that I had never been in Western Canada in all of those years. And I went out and I took one look and I said, holy mackerel, look at this place. I said, they have mountains over there and water over there.
And we're in downtown.
And,
Yes.
and the country is a half an hour away. I mean, this is a great filming site. And then I started thinking about that. And I said, gee, if I think that way, producers are going to come up to the World's Fair and some of them are going to start thinking that way. So I started investigating opening a firm there, and I went back to Vancouver, looked around, talked to some producers, whatnot, came back to Toronto, and when I came back, 3 agencies called me and said, would you like to buy us out? And I thought, well, that's either good news or bad news that they're asking me that. I liked one of the 3. I liked a woman named Marie Morton, who I liked the way she was with her clients and how she cared for them. And when she phoned me, she said, would you like to buy me out? And I said, I'll tell you what, Marie, we don't know each other. Why don't we do this? Why don't we give each other 3 clients and try to sell them 3,000 miles away and see whether it works? And so that's what we did. And then a couple of years passed by, and she phoned me again, and she said, you know, I'm going to be 65. My husband's not well. I'd like to retire. Would you like to buy me out? And meanwhile, I had made friends with Sam Feldman, who is the biggest music agent in this country. And at that time, he wasn't doing film and television music, and he had wanted to. So I phoned him up in Vancouver and I said, listen, I have a chance to buy this firm, but I don't know any lawyers, any accountants in Vancouver. I can't run a business 3,000 miles away, but I could set up a business to run. I said, how would you like to buy this firm with me and you could get into the film and television business for music? And he thought that was a great idea. So he sent over his accountant to have a look at their books to see what they were asking was a fair price, and it was. And we bought the place within 24 hours.
Wow.
And we kept it with her company's name for about a year. And then we switched it over. I had Leonard Bonnell, who was working in the Toronto office, was ready to go on his own, and I said to him, ever been to Vancouver? And he said, no, I haven't. I said, well, if I get you out there for 2 sunny days, you'll never want to come home. And I took him out there, and we got 3 sunny days. And now he's the king of Vancouver.
Wow.
So that was the nature of that business starting. It started at the same time as our literary business in Toronto.
Was Vancouver with the production amount? Would it fluctuate? So if Toronto hasn't been busy, has Vancouver been?
Yes,
doing okay?
Toronto was the film capital of Canada, and then it started to go down with the dollar changing and everything else, and Vancouver became busier and busier and busier, and then it was the number 1 site, and Toronto was the number 2 site, and then there has been a sag in the last couple of years, and now it's really strange because the dollar is high. And yet the production is still happening here. I would never have been able to predict that.
No,
foreign production is still happening here, and Toronto has become a very, very busy place.
It has.
Over the last 2 years, and it is probably the busiest place in Canada now.
And so you've now had, after 40 years, the benefit of working with some of Canada's top talent over the years. I mean, some examples have been Jim Carrey and some of the original Second City crew. Was Marty Short?
Marty Short, Dave Thomas, Dan Aykroyd, Andrea Martin. They were all with us at one point or another.
And then over the years, and it's, I mean, obviously Canadian names have not necessarily exploded, although the Vancouver agency has had the benefit of representing people like Ryan Reynolds and Barry Pepper.
Developing people for the world market.
That's right.
Was that right?
Yeah.
And
What's entailed in that?
It's just that they're on the same time zone as LA.
Yeah.
And they have a tendency to be able to work with them better than we can.
That makes
more
sense.
consistently.
it's the same time zone. There's no lag in like worrying that someone is out to dinner when you're still trying to
Somebody
finish a
gets
deal.
in touch with us at 7 at night LA time, but it's 10 o'clock here.
Well, I know. I live
it's
down.
more difficult.
I live downstairs from an agent, and she has an office in her house, just so that she works with you. So she can handle all these late night, but still business hours out west calls. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this leads to a different question. And so when you're looking at talent and the people that you represent, and in today's market, what is the qualities you look for? Because in turn for you to be able to sell someone, obviously they need to be able to perform, and it's their own audition that's going to get them their work. But what do you look for that might be different from one actor to another?
That's a hard question to answer because there's not anything that you specifically look for. What you look for is them. You said it before that they have to have the talent. So you just have to see how good you think they are, and physically how you think they look, and does their type of character can it be sold? Now. So that's the kind of thing. Often we'll go to plays, and we'll go to a play that we have a performer in, and then while we're there at the show, we'll see somebody else in the cast who is standing out. And we have a kind of an unwritten policy that we don't solicit other people's clients, but we will make sure that we go backstage and tell them how we feel about their performance. And usually, if they have been thinking about it, you will hear from them within 48 hours. And if you don't hear from them within 48 hours, you won't hear from them.
Interesting.
So it's it's the amount of agencies now compared to then. I mean, when you started, there were 5 agencies. I'd say there's probably at least 100 agencies in the city of Toronto.
Yes, there are. There's an organization of agents called TAMAC, the Talent Agents and Managers Association of Canada, and I think there's about 35 members in Toronto, 50 across the country, and there's probably another 50 modeling agencies that have talent divisions. So there's about 100 agencies that work on a job, on any given job.
What does TAMAC do for you? How does it? What is it? Just an association so that there's like a standards code and that kind of thing?
That's exactly what it is. It's a standards code. We had to sit down and hammer it out how we could all live with it. One of the problems that we used to have in the past was a performer would want to leave one agency and go to another agency, and if they were already doing a project, the question was, who got the commission? Of course, the performer would want the new agent to get the commission because that was their future. But it wasn't fair to the agents who had set up the thing in the first place, got it down, and so we all sat down and we worked out a method of commission structure so that the performers were never caught in the middle and didn't have to make those kinds of decisions about who should get this or that or what they should get. And it also is a set of standards for the agents to deliver for the performers, and the performers in turn to deliver for the agents. And we've been very fortunate in both companies in Toronto and Vancouver. We have phenomenal staffs in both places. The agents are excellent. They really are.
You know what? We need to take a break.
Why don't we take a break? We'll be back right after this with Larry Goldhar. And we're back with CastThis. Today is our cleanest show we've ever had.
It's called, instead of being irreverent, I'm finding myself very reverent today. Yeah, we haven't talked about poo once. This is good. Whoops. So,
I don't even think we've sworn once.
No swearing.
No swearing today.
And that is the damn truth.
That's true. Shit.
Whoops. In front of your dad. Oh, my goodness.
Sworn in front of him before.
Have you?
Sure. It's conversational now.
Is it?
I'm not.
Do you swear ever, Larry?
Sometimes.
Okay. You can swear on the show if you want.
There might have been a time when he washed my mouth out with soap, but I think having a family of my own has led it to be that he can no longer do those things to me. I think the most he can do is not invite me to dinner.
I've got a question. The nature of broadcasting is changing now, and thus, and this question was first posed by our producer, Jody. I want to give credit where credit is due.
Props, man, props.
That's really nice.
Yeah. Now things are being broadcast on the internet and so on and so forth. How has this changed the nature of negotiations and stuff with producers and rates that can be negotiated and what have you?
Well, at the moment, that is still a problem.
Yeah.
And if you had asked me 10 years ago,
well, my question would have been, what is the internet?
Yes. That's right. And that would have been my question. What?
I still don't know how to use my computer.
And then they were talking about television programs. The people would watch them on their computers or whatnot. And I said, what for? Isn't the whole idea to get a bigger and bigger television set? Why would you want to watch it smaller and on your watch and every other way? But time has changed. These other uses have come into play. It has played havoc with ACTRA because they didn't know how they have the minimum, like they negotiate the minimums that we use in contracts, and
that's referred to as that scale, right?
That's right. Yeah, and they don't even know. They haven't worked out yet 100% how to use it. One thing that we have to do is we have to go through a period of time. And so that things are in use. And then we can point to it and say, oh, like that program that's a big hit on the such and such. Look at this.
This is the same as laws are negotiated in courts, and precedent needs to be set, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I have to tell you, most of the stuff that's done for the internet and other uses are at the minimums right now. Mm-hmm. That they pay the actors the minimums, and we accept them. The question becomes, from the performer, do you want to do this? Mm-hmm. And most performers, certainly from the past, have said, why would I want to do a thing like that? And then young performers come along and they prove everybody incorrect and that it is successful doing this. Mm-hmm. And people are watching it. And so the issues are changing.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that the same thing, though, let's say, after the movie business came, and radio was invented and television was invented, where people were like, I want to be in the big movie business and then all of a sudden there's a smaller medium that people didn't want to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same kind of
the same kind of thing.
Where it was a negative thing to be into radio,
right?
Or into television.
It wasn't as prestigious to go into this other field, but people who weren't breaking into the prestigious field would try something else and prove to everybody that could be prestigious as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that whole era has changed. West Wing with Martin Sheen, and suddenly you have an amazing show.
Oh, you have people who've never done
people
television.
who don't do television are now television people.
Yeah. That's right. Well,
Close.
Hollywood has come up with a kind of an A+ list. In Hollywood, I always say that if you took what do the newspaper ads come out on Thursdays, Fridays? I don't know. Fridays. If you took the section of paper with the big ads in it, and you kept all those sections for a year, and then you sat down and you listed all the people who were starring in the movie, you'd start to see them repeating themselves. Yeah. And after a year, you would see that people were in 2 or 3 or 4 movies. Mm. And I mean, I've never figured out how many there are, but I would be surprised that if you saw more than 500 to 1,000 people, names altogether, that were in there. Well, do you know how many actors there are? I think Hollywood has 20,000 or something like that, and Canada has 5 or 10,000 or something like that.
That's in the union.
You know, and that's in the union,
Yeah.
right? So there's 30,000 actors. There's probably more than that. There's probably 50,000. But and if 1,000 are working on these things, so what would happen is those people who had ways of life already created because they were character actors in a movie and making good money and whatnot, suddenly weren't working. And they said, wait a minute, I have a big mortgage to pay or a big lifestyle to keep up or whatever. I've got to do something. So they decided to go to television, to work in series work. It's a different kind of work. It's harder in its way. But they were getting good money on these series, so that it developed a whole new class of people. So what happens is now the actors who used to be in films, who are not in films, are in the major roles in television. And so the guys who used to get those major roles in television don't get them anymore. So they go down to the support roles, and the guys who were in the support roles who used to get them
Are getting the one-liners.
So everybody goes down a section until the only people it doesn't affect is the very young, like the very young under 20, because there's always room for newcomers.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a newcomer at some point.
Well, let's for one final question. As an agent, what would you suggest to actors who are looking for agents? What's the best protocol to go about kind of shopping themselves around?
It's a difficult task, because they're actors now are like lawyers and accountants and any other business professional. They go to schools and they graduate every April or May or whatever it is, and there's a whole cluster who come onto the market, and there's no room for those people, and they all submit their submissions to the various agents. But that is in fact the way to do it, because what will happen is that an agent will look down their roster and they'll say, oh, I have an opening. But usually they don't. But if they do, and there's something specific that attracts them to a particular person, that's the person they go after. They also, as I said, like we don't actually go after anybody unless we actually see them perform. So, or unless they're recommended to us by somebody, by a producer or a casting agent.
Is that the same way that you would have amassed talent back in the 70s and 80s before?
Probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit more open. Thank you.
There would just be less of them coming out of school
Yeah.
and graduating for the business.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you very much for coming.
I can't thank you enough. This has been really good. Thanks, Larry.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll see you at dinner.
Tonight.
Larry Goldhar, everyone. I'm Ryan Goldhar.
I'm James Scott. This
Good
was
Shabbos.
CastThis.